but it had such ramifications for my life. And that one decision was whether or not I should keep DMing this game, because I am really into this, right? It is something that takes a lot of my time. And is it irresponsible to take all that energy into a pastime when I really should be looking at our future and paying the bills?
Welcome to Tabletop Talk, where I interview creatives in the tabletop gaming space. I dig into their creative process and their inspirations, because my passion is understanding who they are and why they create. Enjoy my talk with Jake Karlsmark, the creator of Terraino. We talk about how a rough patch in his life became the origin of the Terraino system, the guiding principles of his system and his business, and why he thinks I'm wrong about D&D. Okay, please sit back, relax, run to the dollar store to make cheap terrain that still wows your players, and enjoy my time with Jake.
Hey everyone, this is Ray.
And I'm Jim.
And we're from Tabula Sono.
When we're not making virtual tabletops inside the browser, you'll find us listening to Tabletop Talk.
Howdy friends, Craig here. Today I'm speaking with Jake from GameGearMaster.com. He's a lifelong tabletop RPG fan, dungeon master, adventure writer, and the creator of Terraino, a budget-friendly modular tabletop terrain system built using templates. Terraino is currently celebrating its 5th anniversary and growing by leaps and bounds with thousands of Terrainoers worldwide in over 30 countries. Now, guys, that's the canned intro. But to pull back the curtain, Jake and I have known each other for approaching 20 years. It's been about 15 years since we've seen each other, because many a life ago, we both worked for the same small software company. So Jake, welcome to the third floor.
Hey, thanks. I'm really happy we got to do this. It's always nice to reconnect, and it's nice to talk about common interests, right? Instead of like software that we both don't use for a change.
So were we just both closeted geeks back then? Because I didn't know you were into this shit.
I didn't know you were either. It's funny, but it was such we sort of connected very much on like a lot of business things. Like you were always out in the field. I was in the production facility. So, I mean, I think just the opportunities for that. Were you at the Christmas parties that I was at? I don't think you were.
You know what? I don't know, man.
Did you go to the Durham ones?
Yeah, I always went to the Durham.
Yeah, okay, so that's why. So like that's where we probably would have figured this out,
So funny.
But lifelong D&D player, dabbled into Pathfinder a little bit. I'm not the wargaming guy that you are.
Well, it used to be. I'm not into the war games like I used to be,
really?
man. I used to be wicked into Malifaux most recently, and Marvel Crisis Protocol and stuff. But my mini game interest died with COVID. And that's when I picked up and revisited RPGs and found them again. After taking a break.
That's one positive out of it,
Oh yeah, no, it's been phenomenal. So like this podcast started off as a mini gaming podcast.
Okay.
And then as my interest veered off, then so does the content, and luckily,
got to go follow your passion, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for sure. Yeah, I've always been sort of narrow but deep, so it's basically all been D&D all the time, since forever.
Well, that means you haven't been listening to the podcast, because I will suck you into so many better games than Dungeons and Dragons.
Fair. People have tried, and hey, to their credit, there's a lot of great games out there. There really are.
What we should do is just plan on you coming on to the Twitch channel and playing some games with me running it.
That'd be super fun.
Yeah. Well, next time we do that, I'll reach out to you. But anywho,
cool.
All of this goes to the first question I always ask on the podcast, and that's your origin story, which is a question you've been asked a million times and you've answered a million times, but I'm going to phrase it a little bit differently for you. There was a time where you knew nothing about tabletop role playing, and then it was put in front of you for the first time. Can we go back to that moment it was first introduced?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been asked that before, and my earliest memory, I don't think is actually my first memory of it, but my earliest memory that I have a very good recollection of, and you may have some touch points to this too, because it was a bookstore in Crabtree Mall in Raleigh where I bought the red box of D&D in 1983. Me and my cousin,
Walden Books?
It might have been Walden or B. Dalton, one of those.
B. Dalton, yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And we pooled our money because I was going to be down at my cousin's house for the entire summer. And we heard I was 10.
10, okay.
Yeah, I was 10. I mean, I got started early. Like I really got indoctrinated, and I drunk the Kool-Aid way early in life. And yeah, so we got the red box, and me and my two cousins actually, we played most of the summer.
Nice.
But I think what spurred it on was a friend of mine prior to that had sort of talked about this game where you can be a thief, you can be back then you could be an elf was a class, a dwarf was a class. You could be a cleric, whatever that was. I had no idea. So it just sounded fun. And it just sounded like right up my alley with the type of things that I was into at the time. And that obsession never really went away. I mean, it sort of waned at times because of life and, responsibilities and whatever else. But yeah, it's always been there.
Well, let's go back to you guys pulling together and getting that red box and spending a summer playing D&D. Looking back at it now, right? So that's, let's see, you were 10. So that was what, 15 years ago? Looking back at decades ago, as an adult now, what do you think it was? So that's right. What do you think it was that really captured you and your cousin's interest so much? Why did it take up a whole summer?
For me, I it's funny because the first thing I got after that, because AD&D was already around, right? Advanced D&D was sort of like you bought the red box, which is D&D basic, right? And that was sort of like you graduated into Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And the first book I bought was not the Player's Handbook. I bought the DM's Guide.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back on that, that's sort of an interesting choice. And it really sort of, whether I was conscious of it or not at the time, it really showed how much I loved sort of the mechanics of the game combined with this ability to create a story and a narrative and a world. Like I loved reading Crunchy Bits in the DM's Guide back then because it had like rules on like how to do like climbing, if you're cave spelunking and stuff, all this crazy crap that you would probably never use. But it was so inspirational that it actually led to me making a lot of the adventures that I did then and would do through most of my now my career, but back then, my hobby. So, yeah.
So it sounds like, did you end up becoming kind of like the forever DM then as a result, or did you get to play a lot or?
I, for the most part was DM. Yeah. I was the guy who bought every adventure just because I wanted to read them, and I wanted the opportunity to run them.
So there's two types of forever GMs, right? There's the forever GM that says, look, this is how I do the hobby, right? This is what I love doing. And then there's forever GMs that are like, I would love to play, but there is nobody that'll run a game for me. Which one do you fall into?
I go through feast or famine on it. Like when I do my DMing, I am 110% into it to the point where, it can be a problem at home. That's a whole other story. My wife was nice enough to actually be part of one of my games for an entire year. And like on the 1 year anniversary of her being in the game, she's like, okay, I've been here for exactly 1 year. Why do I know this? Because I know the date I started and I'm done.
Promise made.
Promise made and fulfilled. I give her a lot of credit. I mean, there's a lot of her hobbies that I would never have lasted that long.
Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, so when I get into this, like I really, I just caught, because I wanted to see what you were up to, so I listened to the beginning of episode 200 of your AMA, and you were the intro was something like you're in this labyrinth and there's all these traps, and I spent 4 days working on this, and this guy rolls a nat 20 on a teleport. Yeah, but I am the guy who will still love the fact that I built all these other things because they become characters in my mind. And whenever somebody jumps content on me, it's fine. I'll find a way to use it somewhere else.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that don't realize that for some of us, and I've got a little bit of this, not as much as somebody maybe like you, but there's just joy in world building. And if nobody plays our game, we had fun getting ready for it, right? We had fun writing it. All right, so now we're going to go back to the summer of the red box. You and your cousins play that all summer. When you look at kind of the roadmap of there till now, what was the next big signpost? So in your RPG life, what was the next big thing that hit you?
It was when I rediscovered in a big way as an adult, because you gotta understand, in college, the little that I went, it wasn't a big thing. Yeah. But I actually ended up putting a game together of folks that I worked with, folks that you would know. We did that for a little while, and that sort of like re-sparked the interest for me. Ola Martin and Ken.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
Yeah, well, Martin's a big D&D guy. I didn't know this.
I didn't either.
And Ken, he was all into it, and Ola obviously was the cousin that I played with.
Yeah.
So
Ola was one of the cousins.
Yeah, and his sister.
God, that's so funny.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening, like it's a little annoying to hear people catching up, but yeah. But so Ola was good friends with my first wife, which is how I got introduced to the company that Jake and I both worked with. So Ola was my connection into this company in the same way that you're cousins with Ola. So I didn't. That's really funny. Anyway, yeah. All right. So you guys play that a little. So let's talk about that. Did you just like say, hey, I kind of miss this, and I bet these guys would dig it, and you just pulled it out again, or how did that come together?
At the time, Ken, Ola, and I were in a band together. Mm-hmm. So we were rehearsing every Thursday. And I think it just sort of came up because like we'd always go get a beer beforehand, just kind of like loosen up a little bit, and we'd have some pizza or whatever. And we were just talking around. And we sort of got to this, Ola and I think I got in there earlier than everybody else. And we were talking about how much fun we had as kids when we were doing that. And then I was like, Ken came by and he sort of started expressing interest. And I'm like, well, why don't we do like a kind of a retrospective game? Like, why don't we do a game that we kind of try to capture what that was when we were kids? I mean, right now, we could play the hell out of this game as adults. We have so much life experience. It'd be fun to do. And I immediately got back into my old ways, which was, I made this whole campaign with like trying to, save this this spirit that had been put into a golem, and then all the stuff. Like I ended up piecing together stuff. Like I literally still have like the red box. I still have the books. Oh, yeah. I had all my old adventures from first edition, and I ended up doing something I think was fun. I think we all had a good time. And then that sort of kind of went away. And then I ended up going to the gateway for a lot of new players, which is Adventurers League. Mm-hmm. And I think they might not do that anymore.
I don't believe that's around anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. That and like the Magic stuff is going away too, from what I hear. The in-store events.
I don't know if I mean, the two game stores that are up here in Raleigh, it's still dominated by Yu-Gi-Oh, or not Yu-Gi-Oh, but Pokemon and Magic. Yeah, okay. Thank God, because that's the only reason we have game stores. It's not because of RPGs. Right. We're lucky that we have board games and RPGs for sale because it's the cards that keep them open. But all right, so that game kind of fades away. But does your interest fade away with it?
Not at all. That's why me as a 40-something guy, I went to this Adventurers League where you have people there, and let's be honest, like my age too, but also you had like kids and stuff. And I met a handful of people there who are still really good friends of mine to this day. Yeah. One of which actually I ended up working with on some projects. And that just did it for me. Like that's when I became like the DM for everybody. Mm-hmm. I DM'd that for a year before Terraino kind of became a thing. And then a couple of years after Terraino became a thing. And then COVID hit and the world changed. So yeah, that was big. That was really big.
Now, did you move to playing online at all during COVID or just in person?
I did. I actually ran a game for a while called Menders of the Multiverse. That was my own thing that I actually had so much fun with. And I played with a couple of people from my table and then a couple of their friends. The nice thing was I got to actually make friends around the country because some of them were local, some of them weren't, Right. But the magic was still there for sure. Yeah.
So guys, the Insider Insight series allows me to sit down with designers, developers, artists, writers, and creators and learn how they approach their work. I try to understand their process, inspiration, and the methods for crafting their creations. We've got a lot more to talk to with Jake about this little Terraino thing. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hello, my name is Sam Dunewald, and I'm here to tell you about Dice Exploder, my tabletop RPG design podcast where each week I take a single game mechanic and break it down with a friend. Come listen to me talk to Alex Roberts about love and pity, John Harper about elegance and layout, and Mikey Ham about, what else? Exploding dice! It's Dice Exploder, breaking down RPG design one mechanic at a time. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
So I think, Jake, I probably know the answer to this, but I'm going to answer the question anyway. Terraino, was you trying to solve a problem at your table, or like, let me phrase it this way. I take my daughter to the Game Gear Master Museum, right? And we go to the first exhibit, which shows the very beginnings, the origins of Terraino. What was the first acorn that dropped?
Yeah. For me, it was, I think there's some context around the creation of Terraino.
Yeah.
It was both at one of the best times of my life and one of the worst times of my life.
How so?
Well, because the company that we both worked for, I had just parted ways with. And it was the first time that I wasn't either in school or had a job since I was 16. So it was a little scary, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it was a kind of, you know, step up to the plate kind of moment. Like, this is, if you're going to do something, you should do it now. And I was pretty set on doing something on my own.
Nice.
I come from a family of entrepreneurs. I've always kind of thought that was a natural progression of things. And this gave me the kick in the butt to do it. At first I had no idea what that was. I just didn't, you know, but what I ended up doing was, the one decision I made at that time, which looking back on it was, man, it was such a coin toss at the time, but it had such ramifications for my life. And that one decision was whether or not I should keep DMing this game, because I am really into this, right? It is something that takes a lot of my time. And is it irresponsible to take all that energy into a pastime when I really should be looking at our future and paying the bills? But, you know, as they say, necessity becomes the mother of invention. Terraino really kind of grew out of the fact that money was tight, and I love putting spectacle in front of my players. And something like Dwarven Forest, you know what that is? It's like the premier tabletop terrain. Yep. That's the kind of stuff that I just could never justify putting the money towards when I was in a situation like that.
Sure.
So it was about making my hobby dollar, you know, stretch and still have something amazing to put in front of my players, and something that would make me excited about running these games even more.
All right. So there is somewhere version 1 of this, right? Even though you didn't know what Terraino was going to be. And I'm trying to get a sense of where that came from, right? So do you go to the hobby store and say, I'm just going to grab a couple things? Did you see something that inspired you? Help me out.
Prior to Terraino, I had made some terrain. And I got to give a shout out to the grandfather of crafted terrain on YouTube, DM Scotty. He is one of the most amazing creative individuals. Huge inspiration to me. Not only because he has started a YouTube channel and showed people how to do this, but also he has made something called 2.5D terrain, which is excellent. It's great. They're basically tiles that you can lay out on your table, and it'll kind of denote sort of the area of the playfield or whatever. And you can kind of clip things on the sides like doors and whatever else. Pretty cool. But I was like, you know, I come from the world of Lego. That is what I grew up on. And that's sort of how my brain works. And I was like, okay, well, let's see if we can kind of crack that third dimension a little bit better. And I hate doing things twice. So I like building something and then going, hey, you know what? I can actually use this later, even if I don't know what I'm going to use it for right now. Right. I mean, if I build, like a kind of a stepped kind of, you know, mountain ledge or something like that, that's really what it's going to be. But if I can build pieces that can be reorganized and reconfigured to do that and other things, that's even better. And since I had no money for my hobby, I went to Dollar Tree. Because Dollar Tree, by its very nature, hey, guess what? Most things in there are about $1.
Right.
And the magic ingredient that made it all possible was this specific type of foam board that Dollar Tree sells, which is called Ready Board. And what makes it different than all the other foam boards I've found is that you can peel the paper off. So you basically get
that's interesting.
Right. You get a really nice, consistent 3/6 inch thick piece of foam. And from that, basically the entire system was built out of the idea of kind of sandwiching these together to make a connector. So you had a male and female connector for most things. And and I really enjoyed actually making them. And it's interesting enough, actually, in the Quick Start Guide, which is one of the 2 manuals that comes in sort of the starter kit for Terraino, there is actually an image, the first picture I took of Terraino, and you look at it and it looks like Terraino today.
Wow.
The things that have really changed are the tools to make Terraino. It was challenging in the beginning, but the tools have gotten a lot better, and that's been the journey so far.
So Jake, for those that have not had a chance to go to the website yet, let's help them visualize this a little bit. So obviously it's a podcast, which makes it a little bit difficult, but how would we describe to somebody? Cause I've looked through your stuff and it's freaking cool as hell, dude. But I'm not quite sure how I would describe it other than, it's based on a grid, and then what's next?
So imagine, like, most times when you're using tabletop terrain for something like Dungeons and Dragons, it's built on a grid system, right? So you can kind of, some people have battle mats and they draw out their walls and whatever else. Well, sort of the next logical level of that is to make something that looks a little bit more realistic. So you can imagine this as being like big chunks of Lego, right? So like you have one big chunk that's like a piece of a wall, and then you have another piece of a connector that connects that chunk of wall to the next piece of wall. And within that too, there are different types of walls and whatever, and doorways and all kinds of stuff. And you also have basically the grid tile, which is this, the floor or the ground in any one of your setups that has all these squares around, and that basically is the same as what you would have on your battle mat, right?
Right.
Difference is with this, you can insert walls in between the squares to make all these different assemblies. And the cool thing with them is you can put them together and all this kind of stuff. You can take them off your table and put them on a shelf. And then when you need them, you can put them back down on your table. So there's a lot of utility to them that you don't get in traditional terrain. Even something like Dwarven Forge, they're magnetic to a point,
right?
But you can't really kind of take big assemblies off your table. The other thing is it's actually really, really inexpensive because the main ingredient is this foam board that is, well, currently it's $1.25 a sheet. So, those wall chunks.
Biden?
Yeah, right. Damn it. Inflation. So like, each wall piece is anywhere from about an inch wide to 4 inches wide. And even the biggest pieces of those, if you do the math on between foam, glue, and paint, it's about 15 to 17 cents a piece.
Wow.
Right. So, I mean, I say this, and it's not hyperbole to say that, unless you shouldn't be spending any money on your hobby, that Terraino makes it so your wallet will never be the limiting factor,
right,
for your imagination when it comes to terrain. I did a calculation because I have to also test all the designs and the templates and make the videos and all that stuff. I make a lot of Terraino, so I have thousands of pieces, and I did a rough calculation the other day, and over 5 years, I think I spent about a couple $100 on
how crazy is that
materials. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
And just like ballpark, how much surface area could we cover? So if we drug all of that out and laid it all next to each other, could we fill a basketball court? Could we fill your living room? What are we thinking?
Interesting. You should ask. So do you know Castle Ravenloft?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I was hot and heavy on doing the entire Terraino build of Castle Ravenloft, and I got the first 2 floors done. And yeah, so that is probably about half my collection of Terraino, and that I think came out to be something like 9 by 9 feet and about 1.5 feet tall.
No kidding.
Yeah. And it was also a stress test, right? Like I really want to see how much can you kind of stack this stuff and how durable is it? I was pleasantly surprised, and it actually led to one of my books, Castles and Catacombs. That really was the fruits of that labor, although it never really saw the light of day. Maybe one day.
So here's the question, Jake. You initially make this for yourself, right? You're in a constraining point financially.
Yeah.
And you still want to play. You still want to wow your players when they get to the table. You kind of F around with this thing at the dollar store, come up with a system. When does it first click? Like, I think other people would dig this. Or did you know that from the beginning?
I had a hunch because, I had a pretty good cross sampling of people at my table. I had folks who were professionals. I had folks who were, working entry-level positions. I had kids. When I say kids, like 18, 19, 20, 21, what you and I would call kids.
Those are kids.
Yeah, those are kids. And, so they seemed to be pretty excited about it. And they were asking me how I did it and what it's made out of and all that kind of good stuff. And so what I did was the original Terraino instructions was basically a free PDF I put up on my site. Because at the time I was thinking of doing a retail site for tabletop role-playing game accessories anyway. And this was sort of what I was doing on the side. So I put it up, and it got a pretty immediate response. Like, I got a lot of people writing back to me, loving the system.
Right, because that doesn't just happen on its own, Jake. So how did eyeballs find you?
The company we used to work for, I used to do marketing for.
Right.
So I did a little bit of, guerrilla marketing. I actually went on to Reddit and I did a time lapse of a build of Terraino. And to this day, it's in D&D, it's DNDIY is a subreddit. It is in the top 10 posts of all time. It got 12,000 likes in the first week.
Wow.
And on RD&D, it is in the top 50 to this day.
That's
so I'm like,
incredible.
Okay. I was really that was sort of like, oh wow, this has some legs.
Yeah, I found something.
Yeah, I found something, right? And but then I was like trying to figure out like, what do I do with it? So basically, what I originally did was I really just tried to make more videos on it and all that kind of stuff. But I kept getting asked to do more and different pieces and to extend the system, which I had in the back of my mind, but to make that viable, I couldn't just do it as a hobby anymore because I mean, I was starting a business at the same time, and that obviously has to take precedence. But so I started charging like a little bit for the manual, and people seem to really like it. Like I was very scared to do it. Like I turned on reviews on my site because I'm like, oh God, at least I can turn them off if people really hate this. Here it comes. But to this day, like, we have tons of reviews and they're all generally really great. And I still remember I had been giving out this free PDF for a while, and I still remember waking up my wife at like 11:30 at night because I'm generally like a night owl. Like I stay up and she kind of goes to sleep, but I ran into the bedroom and go, honey, look at this. And she's like, what the hell are you doing? And it's like, is somebody hurt or whatever? It's like, no, look, I found in the wild on the internet, I found somebody who had posted pictures of making their own Terraino set.
That's cool.
And I got to tell you, that was like, you want to talk about like the high points of this whole journey. That was it. And I still talk to that guy to this day. Yeah. Very cool guy. Yeah. It is very strange when it comes back to you like that. Like this little thing that you did in your living room, your spare time comes back and gives back to you,
So I ask this question all the time, Jake, of mostly people who make games. And I find this interesting, and I think it applies to you as well. And you kind of hinted at it, which is, it's one thing for you to write these books, make these videos, put it out there for people to say, hey, and here's the tools, to use it. And then once it's out there, it's gone, right? Then it becomes theirs, right? It becomes their book, and it becomes their terrain and their system. What has come back that has surprised you? So have you seen people take your stuff and do things that you never imagined?
Oh, heck yeah. In fact, there's a Terraino builder spotlight at GameGearMaster.com that shows some. I've had not one, but two people make amazing ships, full sail ships. Yeah, so they've actually adapted the Terraino system to actually have curved hulls. Some of them are gorgeous. It's like, how did you? Because somebody had asked me about doing a ship, and my knee-jerk reaction is like, you can give it a try. It's going to be hard though. You're on a grid pattern, and you have 90-degree walls. I don't want to discourage you, but it's going to be challenging. And lo and behold, a woman from Seattle who lives in a houseboat, she built this. I had a contest that I was doing for a few years called Terraino-tober. And it was like we had a prize and people would enter it, and she won hands down. And it's still every time it comes up on my socials, people are like, wow, this is incredible. So yeah, hats off to her. And she was really awesome.
Oh, that's cool.
And the interesting thing with that is too, like we have a Discord, right? We have a Discord with we average about 10, 11,000 Discord folks on there.
That's impressive.
And she had never been on there. Nobody knew her, nothing. Like she was one of these kind of quiet, hyper creatives out there, which is part of the reason I started doing the Terraino-tober, because I noticed a lot of people came out of the woodwork with new ideas. Yeah.
So from a business model standpoint, for those, sitting here wondering, well, how do you make money putting out stuff that's build your own? And obviously we've talked about the PDFs, but what else is out there?
Yeah, there's two things. I have a Patreon under Game Gear Master. I also sell the PDFs. It's kind of an interesting thing where people don't realize that it's actually pretty expensive to sell something online, even if it's just a PDF.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, the majority of our revenue really kind of comes from our Patreon and the kind folks who purchase our books. There's thoughts there are plans to do more on the retail side, kind of brick and mortar stuff. So
what do you mean by that?
Well, people have been asking for having the templates and the tools pre-built. So this is something that we're working really hard on right now. I'm gathering a team of folks together. A brilliant engineer here in Wilmington is helping me design them and look at fabrication. So stay tuned. I'm hoping to do a pilot test run of these in my local area, probably around the holidays. So we'll see.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
So that hints at my last question about it, which is, where do you think this is headed? So in your mind, it sounds like actually getting into some manufacturing of these tools, these templates that I can get from the PDFs. But quite frankly, I would rather buy them, right? And there's a lot of people that are like me. They're like, yeah,
Absolutely.
I get I can make it, but it's, for my time and effort, it's just better for me to buy it. Is there something beyond that you dream of, or are you thinking just one step at a time?
Well, to circle back to I would love to just have the tools. This is something that is obvious to everyone, right? And the core challenge with that, with providing the tools already made on a store shelf that you can go get or that you can order from GameGearMaster.com, is that my two guiding principles for Game Gear for Terraino are: it has to stay budget friendly and it has to stay awesome. Right. Actually, a third pillar also is it has to be easy to make. Mm-hmm. So with those three items in mind, the minute you start trying to manufacture something, put it in a box, put it on a truck and get into a store and then pay that store to put it on a shelf, your options to keep that budget friendly drastically reduce.
Sure.
Right. So that's why I'm saying we're going to try some things because it is one of those things that it could just work out that people are going to want to pay for the PDFs instead because it's just a better value proposition overall. And I totally understand that. But the question is there a market for folks who are willing to spend a little bit more to get those tools, get that head start on building, right?
So that's the answer to your question is yes. Now, how many of them, I don't know, but that's the camp where I tend to fall.
Yeah.
Which is, for me, one of the most valuable things that I have is time. Right. Mm-hmm. So, being able to save me time has a tremendous amount of value. Now, have you thought about a Kickstarter model? Is that something that you've considered?
I have. I think it's fair to say for every Kickstarter that goes great, there's probably 10 that don't. And it's not usually
generous.
Right. And that's not usually the fault of the donors, but the donors end up getting get left holding the bag, right?
Sure.
They have their money, nothing to show. They lost their money. They have nothing to show for it. I think that model was great at the time, when you had folks doing Kickstarter for like Strongholds and Followers was one of the big guys. The book that there's a guy on YouTube. I can't remember his name now. Shoot, we should cut this out. Fuck, what was his name? Anyway, let me retake that. In 2023, I would say that a Kickstarter model, the people paying into it just have a lot more to lose than they did when Kickstarter was kind of more popular, right? I mean, for every Kickstarter makes it.
Are you saying that the backers have more to lose, or are you talking about the creators?
So. Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, I'm less concerned about me as a creator. I'm more concerned about giving my customers a bad experience because, we
wouldn't
try
that
to
be under your control?
Well. I mean, I guess I could give all the money back, but I don't really want to be in a situation where I am on the hook to folks,
you fear,
and then I can't
fear the
deliver.
obligation that it creates. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I would rather take that obligation on myself,
right,
and have the responsibility lay on me. So if anything goes wrong, it's on me and not all the
That's
people
fair.
who are kind enough to support. If they want to support me or Terraino, buy Terraino products. That's fine.
Yep.
That's also part of how I'm trying to structure the physical products. So scalability is really big. So, when we're starting out in small scale manufacturing, it's still going to be at a reasonable price for everybody. So we can scale and still keep it profitable. So yeah, I thought about Kickstarter over the years. I'm not really a fan of the model anymore. I feel like a lot of grifters have given it a really bad name, and I do not blame people for being a little wary.
Yeah, don't worry. I've not only backed enough Kickstarters for myself, but I've got you covered too. I've backed enough for you and probably 10 other people.
I have too, and I got burned. So, that's sort of what my experience has been.
I have too. That's part of the risk of it. I think for me, as someone who's a chronic backer, I back things obviously with the anticipation that I'm going to get the product, right? But I also back things because I want people to make shit. And in order for people to make shit, you got to support it, right? Yep. So granted, I would say, I've had a pretty good track record. I think I've had 4 non-fulfilled out of easily 400 that I've backed. Easily 400, right? And you know what? Fine. Because quite frankly, there's stuff I've bought that I've looked at once and gone, boy, this is a waste of money. And I never looked at it again. That's kind of how I look at it. Yeah. More importantly, I've had an opportunity to back, especially in the TTRPG space where there's a lot of indies. I've had an opportunity to help bring things to life. Right. So, but I get it. I think,
which is a great feeling for sure.
It is a great feeling. I agree. Yeah. And obviously a lot of my guests are running Kickstarters. That's part of what brings them onto the show. And we've talked a lot about how stressful of a process that is. And it's something that I think that we, listening to this podcast, have learned is that, it seems like, hey, here's a shit ton of money. Now go, go make what you're going to make. But when you hear these creators, Jake, talk about the timer and like they get that deposit in their bank and then that's it.
Right. You have a very specific runway.
You do. Right. And every month it's delayed costs money and cuts into, to that thing. And that bank account just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And quite frankly, that stress is too much for me. Right. If I would have a hard time running a Kickstarter because I don't think my mental health could handle that type of pressure that it puts people under.
I'm right there with you. For me, I'm fairly conservative. Like everything with this business for me has been about following the direction of that success is paving for me, right? Why did I start selling PDFs online? Because people reacted well to the PDF.
Right.
Why did I have to charge for PDFs online? Well, because I had to pay the bills while I was making them better.
Yep.
We made Terraino version 2 because of you can call it whatever you want, a backing or whatever. People paid money for what we had and what we were offering, and that fueled the next iteration of Terraino. And I sort of feel for me, I can sleep better at night that way because the people who are the people who are providing funding to Terraino are already getting value, right? It's not the promise of value in the future. And the way it's set up now, there is enough, it gives us enough financial opportunity to try these things that we are doing, right? Like we've tried another physical product before. It was okay, but it wasn't up to our quality standards. So I stopped. And we're going to keep doing those kind of things because there is an avenue to making something, I think. But again, if I did it as a Kickstarter, I would be having probably a very similar conversation with you because you don't know until you do it.
Right.
So you can plan all you want.
Yep.
You can do all your projections, your business models and stuff, but man, until you start really getting in the weeds on it and literally get the pieces on your off the truck and onto your pallet and you're looking at them, anything can happen. Anything can happen.
There's no question. And even at that moment, I've talked to people both on the podcast and offline, friends that are creators out there. They're like, Craig, you don't know what it's like to have an 18-wheeler pull up to your house.
Terrifying.
And unload crates and pallets of books. that you have to organize, package up, and make sure, this person backed at this level. So they get part of 1, part of C, part of B, and just putting it all in, and then driving truckloads to your local post office. And, I hear all of that stuff and it blows my mind. And I understand now why a lot of creators have found, giving fulfillment and outsourcing that fulfillment makes a ton of sense, because again, it's one thing to say, "Ooh, wow, I got 500 backers." Well, holy shit, 500 pieces of product is a lot of product. I don't care what it is, right? Yep. Yeah, even if it's a zine, that takes up a lot of freaking space. I've got good friends in Pennsylvania that have been on this show a lot, and they have moved a lot of their manufacturing in house, and they've got printers in their house now, and do the whole thing. And I every time they put something out, I back it because there's so much love and quality in it. Yeah. But how they handle that and how they deal with that and balance that with their, being able to raise children and stuff like that, they never cease to amaze me, because they're different people than me.
You have to have a passion for it, or else you will never survive.
I could not agree more. So Jake, the last thing that I always do every time on this podcast now is I like to find out what creators consume. So you spend a lot of time and effort making things for people, right? And people buy your stuff, they groove on it. You have an entire huge community that's been built around this. But there's another side of you that people are doing this to you. So I'd be very curious. Recently, has there been a product, an RPG, a video game, a book, a premium, premium TV? What is something that has just gotten into your brain and you just couldn't let go recently?
Recently, there's an ongoing continuous obsession that I have. And that's been something that I've been doing for the last few years. And that is, I actually had a Twitch stream for it for a while. A game called Satisfactory. Yeah.
Oh, is that the 3D Factorio?
Yes.
Okay.
It's amazing.
So I've played the shit out of Factorio. You got to try Satisfactory. Seriously. So I couldn't
Oh, no. I'm not taking no for an answer. You have to try it. It's so good.
I bounced off it twice, so I own it. And I've tried it twice, and I think I went into it wanting Factorio, which it's not, right? It's a different experience. So what is it about this game that has become, to use your words, an obsession?
It is very similar to Terraino. In fact, a lot of the sort of design decisions that I've made on Terraino were inspired by Satisfactory.
How so?
Well, because for every type of system like that, where you have you have a modular system, you have to sort of determine the level of detail and the scale, right? So Legos are pretty small. You have a pretty small brick. With Terraino, the scale sort of is a wall, right? That's sort of like the smallest chunk of something is a wall. Well, that comes directly from Satisfactory, where you basically the level of detail is you put up chunks of walls. Mm-hmm. And that decision was actually really beneficial for Terraino, because it made me start thinking of the system in that scale. And also it makes it a lot less arduous for somebody to make the system, because you're not making a lot of little Lego brick size pieces. You're making wall size pieces. Mm-hmm. And every time I go back to that Satisfactory I get other fun, interesting ideas. I'll lay out things that I'll do for my tabletop games in there or in Terraino. And it's actually helped me start to be dabbling on the software side of Terraino things too. But that's long ways off. It's a long ways off. But,
so Terraino CAD is not around the corner.
I mean, it would, boy, that would be kind of amazing. But yeah, no, that, and then recently is Baldur's Gate 3. I mean,
I've heard it's good. So what works for you?
It's funny. I have never really been able to get into the computer TTR, computer RPGs, just because I've always felt very constrained. This is the first one that I felt like, even when I did the crazy thing, the game was like, okay, I'm with you. I still got you. I'm not going to put up an invisible wall in front of you.
Right.
And, I give them a lot of credit, because in this age of DLCs and expansions and basically having to pay, 3 figures sometimes to get the full experience as envisioned by the game creator, they released this thing for a reasonable price, and it is feature complete. and it's replayable, and it's way better than it needs to be. So like, you want to talk about a Kickstarter I would back? If they ever did one, I would do it for sure. But I'll do one better. I'll actually buy their game next time for full price.
So interestingly, talking about Baldur's Gate 3, obviously there's been a lot of games before and you've bounced off them, right? So I understand the fact that it seems more open-ended than it probably deserves to be. But is there a moment as you've played Baldur's Gate 3 that made you just go, wow, like you just sat back in your chair and went, I can't believe that just happened?
Yes, but I can't tell you what it is without spoiling, because.
Oh, okay. All right.
And there's a few of those. Yeah.
So I want to talk about them. So for those of you listening, if you're going to play Baldur's Gate 3, you don't want any spoilers for Baldur's Gate 3, fast forward to the end, or stop listening now, but we're going to spoil the hell out of this. So
okay.
I've given
really rough.
They've been given the warning, Jake.
Well, and this is the interesting thing, actually. From what I understand, there are thousands of different endings. And that becomes pretty apparent pretty early on, because you can play as your own character, which I did. I created my own character, or you can play as one of the 6 characters that are in your camp, right?
Okay.
And they all have their own goals and desires and whatever else. You could choose to, follow them or ignore. But basically, the premise of the game is that there's an elder brain that is implanting tadpoles. What are they called? You're gonna hold on. What the hell are they called? Mind
Have
Flare.
You even played this game?
Yeah, I know, right? They're implanting Mind Flare tadpoles in people to try to control them. And the thing that's odd about it is that they're not instantly turning into Mind Flayers. They're actually just sort of under this control of this elder brain. Well, throughout the entire story, you don't know why you were saved from a Mind Flayers that actually had taken you captive and had put a tadpole in you. Turns out later that it is actually a Mind Flayer that is actually helping you against its own kind. Yeah. And it gets better than that. The Mind Flayer is, I can't tell you who it is. I'm sorry. It's just so wrong to put it out, because when I was like, oh, that's really cool. But holy crap, the whole time,
whatever that reveal was had a huge impact. And did you just not see it coming, or?
Not at all. Nope, not at all.
That's hard to do.
I was like, wow, that's really neat. Like, where do they go with this? Because there's going to be a sequel. There better damn will be a sequel, because it was that good. It was really cool. Like, I will say, like, it made me as a DM start thinking about other possible campaigns that I'd want to do, and also adjusting campaigns that I have in mind now. And I mean, to me, that is why I consume creative content, right? I mean, it is a very selfish act on my part. I use it as ammunition, for my own creativity. And it was so stimulating in that way. And it was just well crafted. Oh, it's like chef's kiss,
That's so cool. Did you like the D&D movie?
You know what? There was a lot going on at the time. I don't know if you knew about this whole thing with the SRD. Yeah. Okay. So at the time,
I was steeped in it.
Yeah. So I was like, I didn't go see it in the theater on principle. I did write to a lot of folks. I said, to the Discord community for Terraino, I was like, look, just so you know, I'm not going to go see it, but you make your own choice, but here's why. And I think it's, you stand with creators and the folks who have built D&D up with their own creativity. So I didn't actually see it in theaters. I did see it when it came on, I think it was on Prime. And coincidentally, somebody, I was either in a Reddit post on Terraino or in Discord, I can't remember, somebody's mother actually worked on the movie. And he's like, respectfully understand your position. Just want you to know there are a lot of creators on there that have nothing to do, with
Wizards. Yeah.
With the Wizards. I mean, they're working stiff like everybody else. Like, I totally understand that. I respect that. And, congratulations to your mother. It obviously looks amazing. But I still have to sort of do what I do. And both things can be true
at the same time, Jake.
Right,
that's
exactly.
the thing to remember,
right? But when I did watch it, I thought it was very true to the spirit of D&D, and it wasn't just like a Lord of the Rings knockoff with like a little bit of D&D varnish on top of there. It was super fun, and I loved it that it was centered around a bard, because man, that fits. That fits really well.
It does. And I thought
the bullshit artist of the group, right?
Yeah, and I don't know what it is about Chris Pine, but he he is set up for failure with me so many times and never does.
Yes.
Like,
when he was going to be Kirk, I was like, I can't.
I was like, are you kidding me? And it was phenomenal. He was a phenomenal Kirk, and
he was
great. I mean, he made Wonder Woman. I think that he was a big part of why Wonder Woman was so good, and he's just a damn good actor. And I thought he did great in D&D. And the other one who I thought was great was God, it's terrible. I can't remember the actor's name from Alien. Not from Alien, but from Fast and Furious.
And from Lost. She's
Lost.
Amazing.
Rodriguez? What? Oh,
Rodriguez,
hell. What's
something.
her name?
Like Emma Rodriguez or something.
Oh, she's so good. Hold on a second.
But my experience with her is from Lost. Like I never got into the Fast and Furious movies.
I don't think I remember her in Lost, but Lost
she was one of the others, I think, in Lost.
Was she really? Oh my God, that's crazy.
And she's a solid actor. I mean,
she really is. Hold on here. Cast Michelle Rodriguez. God damn,
we were close.
We were close, but yeah, Hugh Grant, I could give or take.
Yeah, he was a good villain. I mean, he was really, fine. Whatever.
He was fine. Paige, was it Regé-Jean? Paige, phenomenal. Justice Smith. I mean, the cast was strong. The writing was fine. A little too jokey for me, but I laughed and I enjoyed it. So
yeah, I mean, I'd rather have the jokes and then have them not land and not try. Because it could get really, I mean, basically it's a heist.
Yeah,
get the MacGuffin kind of a thing, right? It's every D&D adventure of all time, and that's going to get a little old if you don't have the little flavor along the way.
Yeah, and to top it off, I'm one of those craft beer jerks that doesn't play D&D, right? That
Ouch.
There's so many better games out there. There's so many better games. That's why I laugh at myself, right? That's a total craft beer attitude, right?
Yeah.
But I had enjoyed it.
But you gotta give me time. You gotta give me an opportunity to defend your little comment there about D&D.
I that I don't like it. That's the only comment I made.
I know, but I need to tell you why you're wrong. Okay, so
buckle up, kids. This is going to be good.
Up, kids. Here we go. You can't see this, but I'm rubbing my hands together. See, what it is for me is the core of any role-playing game is fundamentally the same. It's about a structure to adjudicate decisions from players and the story and the game master, right?
Okay.
So you can find a lot of those frameworks that will actually add interest to the dynamic of the game. But if your primary goal is to tell a story with other people, you could do a lot worse than D&D.
And that I don't argue.
It's very open-ended in that way.
Yeah, you could definitely do a lot worse. That's not my contention. Yeah. Question is, you can do a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, look, I read Blades in the Dark recently, which is a pretty cool RPG that I actually like to try, and it's got a lot of really cool, innovative stuff in there. The problem I always come back to, though, is, and it is a shame, it's a true shame because there should be more. But in a small town like I live in, I couldn't find another person to play Blades in the Dark with.
Yeah, and there's no question about that. I mean, one of the best things about D&D is that there's, you can find players, right? Yeah, you can definitely find players. Now, finding Dungeon Masters is a bigger challenge. Absolutely. But see, now here's the trick though, right? You use the name of Dungeons and Dragons, and then you put whatever other crap in there that you want to do. Like I used rules from 3.5, the minion rules, in my 5e game. Nobody batted an eye. I did it when I had a dragon turtle attacking a ship with level 0 characters, which is also something from an older version of D&D. So I said each one of you is responsible for 5 crew members, but every time you and your group of 5 crew members takes damage, one of your sailors dies. So it basically was like 5 rounds of combat where they didn't have to worry about dying because they had like 3 hit points each. But that's not in rules as written, right? I mean, that's just not there. And I've done other things like that too. Like, I put card games into D&D and stuff. For me, it's like, as long as you don't say it's not D&D, you will find players, right? And then you can put whatever shit you want in there. Blades in the Dark, fine. Put those mechanics in there. So I was getting ready, Jake, to counterpoint to you, but I knew if I just kept quiet long enough, you'd do it for me.
Oh, boy.
Which is you're not playing D&D anymore.
Well, that's fair. That is fair.
So here's the thing. Is I'm a firm believer in the concept that system matters. That, yes, you're right. Loosey-goosey, at the essence of every role-playing game is the same, whether it's Call of Cthulhu, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons, whether it's Blades in the Dark, right? We're going to sit around, we're going to pretend to be other people. We're going to have a randomizer of some sort. unless you're playing Amber, and then, you know, we're gonna play pretend, right? But I am a firm believer that a system can do one of two things. It can either help or hinder that process.
Absolutely.
And Dungeons and Dragons, if you want to play a combat simulated RPG, all the rules are there. They're all there ready for you. If you want to do more with D&D, then you're going to have to add to it, right? You're not going to find that in the book. The rules for combat compared to the rules for everything else, page count proves the point. Not necessarily a bad thing. Again, the best thing about D&D is the brand. You can get people that have never RPG'd before and they've heard of D&D. But you look at something and you're bringing up one of my all-time favorite RPGs, and that's John Harper's Blades in the Dark. And Blades in the Dark is a good example of where system matters, right? So it is a game to run heists. So mechanically, everything is built to support that. Now, can you run a heist in D&D? You sure as hell can, right? Yep. But you're going to be adding things and pulling stuff in from Blades and, you know, doing stuff like that to do it. Whereas if I want to run a heist game, I'm going to pull out Blades or another Forged in the Dark game. So, and people who listen to this podcast, I think, know this. It's not that I poo-poo D&D, right? Thank God D&D exists in the same way I think, thank God Magic the Gathering exists, because there'd be no game stores without it, even though I don't play the game. I want D&D to be super freaking successful, because I do believe that it's a rising tide. Now there's indie people out there that are listening right now, Jake, that think I'm full of shit on that one. They think that D&D sucks up all the air in the room. I am not of that belief. I think that there's more than enough air, and the more people that learn about this hobby, the more often it is. Like when I introduce our role playing to people, I don't teach them D&D, but when people show an interest, I'll go, it's like D&D, right? Have you ever heard of D&D? Because that's my way in, because that is, you know, that's the way it is. In the same way in miniature gaming, it's Warhammer, right? There's much better mini games out there than Warhammer, like so many better games than Warhammer. But thank God Warhammer is successful, because that's what has kept mini games from doing well. And if D&D died tomorrow, the hobby would suffer dramatically.
That's sort of what I come back to too, is like, it's not like if D&D wasn't what it is today, that there would be all this room for all these other games to prosper. It's not like because D&D's here, these things are not prospering. It's just, you know, there's a lot of really amazing games out there. I mean, if you were to play all of them, you would be old and gray before you even had, you know, the majority of the best games played. You just can't do it. Yep. So, I mean, there's just a lot of competition in the marketplace, which is great. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, but in fairness to D&D, I think D&D is designed with the idea that you make it what you need it to be. So,
I don't agree. I don't agree with that statement.
Okay. Well, but not from the combat mechanics.
I think that's what people do with it, Jake. Right, which is a separate thing. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. It's not a bad thing, but it's not supported by the game. But it's supported by an unbelievably huge legacy and history. Well, that's the thing. Yeah. Right. Like, and that all matters. On that, the other aspect of it too, that there's a lot of people that are on my side of the argument that take it too far, which is like, well, you know, why won't you even try something else? And here's the thing, and I suspect this brings for you, system mastery is a big deal.
It is.
Right. So when you learn to play D&D and you get really good at playing or running D&D, it's hard to pull somebody off of that, because system mastery is important. Now,
I mean, it's kind of like when Jordan went and started playing baseball, right? Correct. I mean, he's a great athlete, but he was not a particularly good baseball player.
Yeah. So, and that's significant. Now, granted, I have another hobby, which turns out it is a separate hobby, which is I love to learn RPGs, which is different than running RPGs, which is different than playing RPGs. I enjoy reading RPG books, learning about RPG books. The essence of this podcast is me bringing creators on and understanding how these games get made. That's a hobby in itself. Not everybody's into that, right? There's enough people that say, hey, I know D&D and that's what I enjoy doing. And I'm sure there's better games out there, but I don't have the interest.
And I don't think you're in, I think there's a lot of company for you, because I find myself doing the same thing. There for every RPG that I've ever actually been in a game of, I've read about or learned about easily 2 or 3, you know? Yeah. And I think it would be interesting to see if somebody actually has numbers on how many people bought the Blaze in the Dark book compared to how many people are actually in games of Blaze in the Dark. And I think you probably, or Blaze in the Dark, you probably find that there's a high percentage of people who just read the book, because I found it actually a really nice book.
I'll tell you right now, I would be shocked if 1 out of 10 people that
bought
and read the book have played it. I'd be shocked.
And it's a shame. It is a shame, you know, because of those 9 out of those 10 that are not actually playing the game, a lot of them want to play it. Granted, there are people just going to read it for pleasure, like you're saying.
Yep.
But yeah, and it's just because of the fact that it's hard to find players.
It is. So the last parting thing I'll put out there, and this is something that I think people that are in the D&D ecosystem struggle with, and I think it's where I'll leave things, is D&D is not an easy game to learn. There's a lot of rules. Now, can you just sit down and start playing D&D? Yes. But to really learn D&D, there's a lot going on. And I think one of the big things that hurts people is they think, I don't want to learn a new system, because they think that entails learning D&D again. And what I think that they don't realize is that there are games that don't have that load,
knowledge,
right? Yeah, that don't have that load. The last little bit, I just lied to you. This is now the last little bit, is something to think about too, is the shortage of DMs, right? It's a chronic problem. It's always been a problem in Dungeons and Dragons. There's always just not enough people to run games. And that's because of the DM load. There's so much that a DM needs to have physically, to buy, and to learn to be able to run D&D. You compare that to some of the newer, more modern games that I call modern games, where that load is shared and you're able to get an unbelievable experience, and people that would never run D&D, because the load is so much lighter, can run some of these other games. So for those of you listening, I've already talked to Jake about how I'm going to open up his world and and get it. But hey, you've already bought Blades. That's usually my first go-to, is go buy Blades. So you're one step ahead.
But I get the load part. Like there's kind of 2 categories of these games to me. There's the hardcore games where you do have to have a DM who knows what he's doing, right? Because he's going to not only run the game, he's going to educate new players on how to play the game. I mean, I've done that with my wife. I've done that with a lot of players over the years. And
he's also going to be responsible for writing a story. He's going to be responsible for running people through a story. Yep.
But we played a game called, I think it was Monster of the Week.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, we basically made our characters and did the entire tale in one evening. And that to me is like more like of a party, like a gathering, casual kind of a game, you know. But I think the 2 have their benefits and weaknesses. One has the option for deeper narrative and a deeper appreciation and love for your characters. Like, I still remember my character kind of from that Monster of the Week thing, but it wasn't exactly deep. But then the Monster Week, you have a fun time with your friends. Like, you can get to learn, you know, there were some new people that I'd never met before. I got to know them. And it was fun. You know, I just don't think that, the level of crunch necessarily is a deterrent to certain types of players, you know?
Well, and that's the other thing that people need to understand too, is what we want the games for, right?
Right, exactly.
So for the level of investment you could have in a PBTA game like Monster of the Week can equal, if not greatly exceed D&D. But that is what D&D brings that Monster of the Week doesn't, is crunch. And that is something that people enjoy. They enjoy the crunch. They enjoy the tactical nature.
But it is crunch with it is crunch with the ability to still steer a narrative from the game master's perspective, and also leaving a lot of agency to the players outside of combat. Like, that's the thing. Like, I know on a lot of the crunch in current 5e D&D is on the combat side, right? But if you look back at D&D, like first edition, read that DM's guide. It is granular when it comes to adjudicating player choice. It's not just combat, and I think that's one of the things
go back to page count, Jake, though.
Oh, I know, man. Oh, I know. But I got to tell you, I still have that DM's manual. I love that thing. It is a gold mine
there's
for
four
DMs.
sentences. There's 4 sentences on social interactions, but there's 45 pages on how to swing a sword.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not going to say you're wrong, but I am going to say that I still find wonderful little nuggets in there to this day.
And again, nothing invalidates the other, right?
Absolutely.
It's all a big part of it. But I think the biggest thing that's happened for me, Jake, is I've had a bit of an awakening. And one of the things that has changed for me is the concept of story. I'm an old dude, right? I come from the world of, because I don't play D&D now, but I've played a shit ton of D&D.
Right.
And I came from a time where the GM created a story, created a narrative. You came to the table and you played that story. What I'm realizing now that I'm enjoying more is kind of a different perspective, which is not creating a story. So story isn't the product of play, it's the byproduct of play.
Okay.
And it's for sure. It's a really interesting concept that a good friend of mine turned me on to that I'm still trying to gronk a lot. But I find myself stepping away from here's the story and moving more towards here's the scenario.
Yeah.
Right. Here's your characters. Here's where we're going to start. And I'm just going to lay track in front of you and I'm going to follow wherever you go. And what's amazing is how story emerges from that on its own. And that's the part that's kind of blown my mind recently. So
yeah, that's what I got out of the monster of the week thing. That is, you are essentially just kind of like setting the stage, right?
Exactly.
You're not putting in the bit players and whatever else. So the players themselves are doing that for the most part.
Yeah.
And that is very fun. And it is a very interesting take. And it kind of blew my mind the first time I did play that type of thing. Hey, again, it's just another way to enjoy the hobby, right?
Exactly. And that's where it all comes back down to, right? I don't give a shit if you play D&D or not. What I care about is that you're playing, right? That's what I care the most about. And that's what I always say to people. So guys, Jake, there's a lot of really cool things to do on a Tuesday night that doesn't involve sitting and catching up with me. So I appreciate you making the time.
Oh yeah, no worries, man. It's been fun.
And for those of you listening, this is the end. You made it. I appreciate you listening. Take care. Big thanks goes out to Jake for joining me today. You can find more about their work on GameGearMaster.com. Now, do you prefer playing on a battle map or only using theater of the mind? I'm dying to hear your thoughts. Let me know on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, or drop me a line at admin@thirdfloorwars.com. And don't worry, all those links are in the show notes waiting for you. Please take a minute to rate, review, and share this podcast. Tabletop Talk grows because of word of mouth. You don't want to miss the next episode. I talk with Emily Weiss about her mothership adventure, Picket Line Tango, and how her experience as a public defense attorney informs her writing of horror. Happy gaming, friends, and remember what Elizabeth Gilbert once said: a creative life is an amplified life, a happier life, an expanded life, and a hell of a lot more interesting life. Go create. Good first segment, sir.
Is there any? Do you ever do video or no?
Not for the podcast.
Okay.
No.
Okay, good.
The only video stuff I do now is I live stream games, running games.
Yeah, man. It sounds like a lot of fun. I would definitely.
Yeah, if you go to the Third Floor Wars YouTube channel, you'll see a shit ton of me running games.
Nice.
I'll bring us back. Hey, are you still here? Look, the podcast is over. And you sat through all of the breaks and bloopers? Well, if you're here, you might as well run over to patreon.com and become a supporter. Don't forget to rate and review this podcast too while you're at it, on whatever platform you're listening to. I do appreciate you sticking around. Take care.